Hello, everybody. How's it going? Well, I'm extremely not envious of those judges right now. I was just telling Jonathan backstage, I was expecting all right, be some pitches, probably be like a super clear winner. I'm really thankful that that decision is not on me, and instead I get to yap at all of you for about 25 minutes. So we'll have some fun with it. But I am extremely impressed by your community, and I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. You know, this isn't the sort of like light change the world audience. 7 p.m. on a Friday night, guys. This could be Netflix or a microbrew, but here we are trying to support some awesome local businesses here and spark this idea of social entrepreneurship. So my hat is off to all of you. And tonight, what I would like to chat a bit about is this idea of how we can dig deeper to navigate difficult situations in our lives. And on the one side, I want to bring in the thread of entrepreneurship as part of my journey and part of what we're all here for. But a big thread of where I come from in this conversation is from spiritual teachings from the Amazon and lessons from indigenous elders down in the jungle. Seems like a little bit of a bizarre unification of business and Amazonian wisdom. But in my experience, I found that the threads of teachings that I found in both disciplines have been extremely parallel. Both living in the Amazon and building a business are about what it's like to live at your edge and the kind of growth and depth and resourcefulness that comes from those experiences of being just at and beyond your comfort zone. So I want to share some of my story building RUNA, the organization that I co-founded, and lessons that have helped guide us and hopefully can help guide other entrepreneurs and people to navigate challenging situations. So my story definitely does not begin with shamans or spider monkeys or poisoned dart frogs. That all came much, much later. I grew up in the suburbs of California, but my family roots actually come back in this neck of the woods. My grandfather, who was one of the main inspirations in my life, grew up a little bit north of Harrisburg. He was a Quaker, grew up on a small apple orchard, and grew up a humble farmer. And he went on to become the president of the University of California system in the 1960s. A very interesting time to be in the University of California. But my grandfather was known for designing the system of higher education in California. So what remains one of the leading public higher education systems in the world was his vision. And it came from a lot of his values, which I see in this community and have always identified with my Quaker roots, with this belief that higher education should be available to everyone. So he designed the University of California system, the state schools and community colleges, to provide access to education for all. And to me, that's a great emblem of social entrepreneurship, and I think also a great case study for this region of what people can do locally that can expand and bring ideas around the world. And for me, that was definitely a big inspiration in my life. So what I loved growing up was playing soccer, and I got lucky to get recruited to play Division I soccer at Brown University out of high school. And I went and was on such an incredible high, feeling like I'd accomplished this big goal in my life. But I struggled a fair bit with depression and anxiety, as I think a lot of young people and a lot of people in our society can relate to. These 21st century black plague, as I like to describe it, of certain levels of dissatisfaction and searching and lack of connection that I think in our communities we can struggle with, and I struggle with as a young person. And I always felt like there was some other parts of me and some other parts of life that I just didn't have access to. And as an athlete, I was really interested in this idea of peak performance and loved studying and reading about top athletes and coaches. And I read one day about this man, whose name is Mark Allen. Any triathletes in the room? Anyone? No, maybe? I see a hand. No, okay. So Mark Allen is the 7-time winner of the Hawaii Ironman. For those of you who don't know, that is running a marathon, then a 110-mile bike ride, and then a 3-mile swim. Mark's story is fascinating. Mark ran the Ironman a few times, could never really win. Then he started studying with an indigenous elder in Mexico, and then he won the Ironman 7 times. So for me, as athlete, I'm kind of like, all right, so this isn't just some heebie-jeebie, waving some feathers kind of a thing. Homie won the Ironman 7 times. And he attributes, he's like, I learned certain ways to channel deeper parts of my heart, my mind, and my spirit that allowed me to push through those mental and physical barriers that allowed me to win. And to me, that was such a portal to try and look at these other parts of ourselves that in modern society we often don't have access to. and the value of vision, the value of imagination, the value of emotion to carry us through difficulty. So I wanted, if people are game, to offer a bit of what I call an imagination exercise to engage in this quickly if people are game. This is completely voluntary, but anyone who wants to participate, I suggest it. If everyone can stand up, if you're game. So we're going to do, if you have anything in your hands, put it down on the floor. So we're going to do an imagination exercise. This is a fun one. You can let your imagination go wild with it. So make sure your feet are planted on the floor. I want to ask everybody to take your left hand and put your palm face up. And then put your right arm out and make a thumbs up. And now if you trust me, I'm asking you to close your eyes. Keep them closed. And I'm going to ask you to imagine two different things. So with your eyes closed, first imagine what it would feel like if I was taking a huge stack of Encyclopedia Britannicas and placing it in your left palm. And as we all know, these are books that are very, very heavy. So imagine you could feel the weight of those books in your left hand. And that weight, these heavy books pressing down on your palm, imagining and feeling that weight in your left hand, pushing it down and down and down. And now imagine around your right thumb, I'm tying a string connected to 15 helium balloons. And we all know that helium is a gas that rises. So imagine feeling that string on your thumb, pulling your thumb up and up and up. Getting a little bit lighter as you feel the helium pulling your thumb up. You feel the weight in your left hand of those books, pulling it down and down and down. Now, everyone freeze and open your eyes. Look around a little bit. Varying degrees of movement, varying degrees. But I'm going to venture, you can put your hands down and you can sit down. So I appreciate everyone indulging in my imagination exercise. I'm going to guess that even if your arms were like this, or if they were just like this, that everyone could probably feel something, right? Almost everybody at least felt a little something. And to me, it's such an incredible example of the stories we tell ourselves, what we have in our mind, can have physical impacts. And this is getting increasingly proven through medical science and definitely, in my view, through entrepreneurship, that the ideas we carry in our minds translate in the most visible and visceral ways to the world that we create around us and how we show up in the world. So that was the insight that I originally got from Mark. After my freshman year of college, I reached out to Mark. I was very fascinated by his story. He invited me to come spend the summer studying with him and his teacher from the Huichol tribe. From there, I couldn't resist. Instead of going back to school, I called my parents and told them that they would need to find me in the Peruvian Amazon, which they were not terribly excited about, needless to say. But I ended up spending the better part of the next 2 years deep down in the rainforest. And I was fascinated by the incredible relationship these native communities have to the natural world around them. And what I began to study were the indigenous languages, and specifically how these languages encompass and embody the connection and relationship these people have to the natural world. So a couple of great examples of this. There's one tribe that doesn't have words for left and right. Their only ways to navigate space are upriver and downriver. So a sense of personal space isolated from the environment is literally inconceivable. There's not a way to think about or communicate what that would be like. In other tribes, the word for person is the same for a jaguar, or a tree, or a human. So their idea of what it means to be alive is shared in the most fundamental way between wildlife, the trees, and people, which creates a radically different relationship to the way that they manage the land around them, the way that they use the natural world as a pharmacy and a supermarket. At the same time, these are people who struggle to make money. I'd frequently wake up in these villages and hear chainsaws cutting down hardwood trees. And one day I went on my sort of environmental high horse and confronted one of the men in the village and said, "Hey, you guys talk a big game about the spirits of your ancestors and trees, but you just ripped down a 100-year-old mahogany tree. Like, how do you reconcile that?" And he looked at me point blank and said, "If you had a choice between cutting down a tree or having money to send your kids to school, what would you do?" And that to me felt like a dagger in my heart. It felt like recognizing that these are communities who don't want to have to degrade and exploit their rainforest, which is part of their community, but they really struggle to participate in a globalized world, which is really inextricably forced upon them at this point. So from there, I started thinking about what would alternate futures for the people of the Amazon look like. How can they share parts of their incredible biodiversity and cultural heritage with the world in a way which is on their own terms and not forced upon them? And I fell in love with one particular leaf. It's a leaf called Yousa. It's a little bit of a funny word. We often joke, we say, "Why you so happy?" Easy way to remember it. But Yousa sits among the 50,000 different plants in the Amazon, a leaf that has caffeine. Yeah. It's one of the most highly caffeinated plants on the face of the earth. It's brewed like tea, but completely unrelated to green or black tea that people might be familiar with. It also doesn't have tannins, so it's a leaf that has an incredibly smooth taste and a little bit of sweetness as well. And the Quechua people in Ecuador get up at about 3 o'clock in the morning. The whole tribe sits around the fire, and they boil these huge clay pots full of Yousa and interpret dreams and tell stories, and it's the central time in which they connect as a family and as a community. And it's a beautiful tradition that they say is the blood of their people. Yet no one had ever commercially produced this leaf in any capacity. Zero. Not even locally in Ecuador. It was completely relegated to a tradition of the indigenous people. So finally went back to school. My parents were very happy. Made it through to my final semester, and long story short, wrote a business plan with one of my best friends, Dan, to start some sort of an ill-conceived beverage company that would use our supply chain to support these communities. Nothing nearly as polished as any of the pitches you saw tonight, I promise you. But we ended up in actually a similar position. We won, very surprisingly, my degree was in creative writing. Dan's was in marine biology. But we somehow won Brown's business plan competition and then the Rhode Island State business plan competition, and had actually, surprisingly, $70,000 of cash and services to start this business, which we had no intention of actually starting. But as we sat on it, the only reason I can give for why we decided to go for it is something deep inside of us felt right. As we thought about what this could be, and even the small fraction of a chance that this would work, that we knew that if it could work, we could help create some difference in the world. So the look on our face here is I'm about to move to Ecuador in 2 days, and I might get eaten by an anaconda, and my parents hate me again. But we did it. 2 days after graduating, packed our backpacks and moved down to the middle of the jungle in Ecuador. Again, we were extremely ill-prepared to tackle this challenge. We knew a total of 2 people in Ecuador at that point. So we did 2 specific things which were absolutely fundamental to growing our organization. The first is that we had a decision to make. Option A, pretend we were business people, which was absolutely going to fail. Or option B, do the only thing that we knew how to do, which was act like students. So we came up with this idea of what we called a liberal arts approach to business, which meant that what we did was we traveled around for 6 months, and we talked to every single person who would talk to us. We got up at 3 in the morning and drank huge amounts of Yousa with every community that would invite us to come talk with them. We interviewed government leaders, nonprofit experts, business experts, to learn everything we could about the really complicated mix of local politics, indigenous organizations, exports, everything, so we could learn. And in that learning process, show our vulnerability and humility to build partnerships in an authentic way. The second thing we did was build partnerships. We used the spirit of Yousa as our business model and asked ourselves what it would be like if we got a community around the fire of our idea, the mythological fire of this vision for the business, and created partnerships and brought these people to the table as a sort of collective diversity to envision and create what this business could be and how it could come together. Our first big break, this came probably one of the absolute low points in Ecuador. I was deep in the jungle and had to get back to a meeting with the Ministry of Export, who was giving us, or was hopefully going to give us a grant. But I didn't have any money to pay the $10 airport tax. I had 0 money. So I pawned off my headset to a 13-year-old in the parking lot, got on the airplane, made it to the meeting. About 2 months later, we got a call from the Export Ministry saying they were going to give us a $50,000 grant to build what we touted as the world's first research and development facility for Yousa. In reality, that was a steel chamber in our buddy Fausto's garage. The chickens aren't really visible in the picture, but they're definitely there. But it was a huge break. We went from absolutely broke and struggling and about to go home to having the little bit of seed of hope to make it work. Part of the entrepreneurial part of the story, too, is that in this grant, we had to, if anyone's written grants before, had to explain every single line item for the budget, which we'd never written a grant before, had never done anything like this. We somehow forgot to include money to transport this extremely heavy steel drying chamber from Quito, the capital of Ecuador, down to the jungle, which is about a 10,000-foot descent on pretty terrible roads. So one of my favorite sayings about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is that you have to believe in calculus and not statistics. And this goes for anybody who's doing anything creative, where there's a will, there's a way sort of a thing. And by that, in entrepreneurship, it's not a hedge your bets, try some things, something might work. It's a, there is an answer, and I'm going to find it, no matter what. It's a calculus that way. So basically what we ended up doing is we took 12 guys and lifted the drying chamber in the back of our 1974 pickup truck, which was our only mode of transportation, which promptly went from like this to like this. And normally the ride down to the jungle takes only about 4.5 hours, but it took about 19.5 hours, because every 10 minutes the brakes would start glowing bright red and stop working. So we'd have to pull over and just wait, pour a little bit of bottled water on the brakes, wait a little bit, drive some more, same thing would happen. 20 hours later, we had a dryer in the jungle, and business was moving forward. So a lot of the process then became building our team. And we tried to do everything we could, not just to leave our mission at the door or as a piece of paper that we read once a year at a company meeting. But we thought really proactively about how we could build the mission of our organization into the DNA of how we operated. So not just fanciful ideas, but real operations. So we built a hybrid organization to reflect the diversity of our mission, half for-profit, half nonprofit. We created unique employee incentives around, for our US team, trips to Ecuador. For our Ecuador team, trips for education, getting to go to the US, Argentina, Brazil to learn. And different ways we could take that same spirit and build and operate a business in that same mission. And it's grown quite a bit. In Ecuador, in about 4 years, we were able to build a network of about 3,000 family farms who've planted about 1.2 million trees in degraded lands, reforesting lands that the Yousa trees are grown under the canopy. It's all organic, fair trade certified. It's one of the only crops now in the world that's 100% grown by family farms, really setting the tone for sustainable production for an industry that we've now begun to spark beyond just our business with RUNA. And we really created, on the Ecuador side, or we had at that point, value for this idea of what it means to be RUNA. And RUNA in the Quechua language means to be fully alive. And it's a spirit for them of what it means to be connected to their ancestors, to have support from their community, to have awareness of the implications of every action that they take and every word that they say. And so we found a way to take this tradition, which had carried them for thousands of years, and help support bringing it forward to create new value in today's economy and a new vision of what it can mean for them to be RUNA with their own voice and their own relationship to the world. That part of it was hard. Building a beverage company to compete with Red Bull and Monster has also been extremely, extremely, extremely difficult. And figuring out how to make these leaves and this brand of RUNA resonate with consumers was a whole nother piece of the challenge. And I want to share one piece of insight and really a pivotal moment for us as we thought about how do you take these leaves with this incredible history in Ecuador and make them relevant to consumers who aren't from the jungle, probably can't pronounce Yousa, and don't really even know where Ecuador is in the first place. So we got a great piece of advice from our professor at school who told us to focus on what he called the dramatic difference. And I saw it very well reflected tonight. And the basic question is to think about any product or service that you're offering in any business or nonprofit, and think about how it's not just some minor evolution of some existing product or service, but how is it over the line different from anything else out there? What's the dramatic single difference that makes you separate from your competition and the slew of other things that everyone else is doing? So for us, we looked at what was happening in the hydration beverage space. You know, we looked 10 years ago, Gatorade and Powerade were pretty much what you drank for hydration. All of a sudden, about a decade ago, coconut water started popping up. This year, Vita Coco will probably sell about $1 billion of coconut water. The global market for coconut water is several billion. And they took a product which was 3 times as expensive as Gatorade and made an enormously successful business out of it. Why? In our view, there were 3 things that made it dramatically different from a Gatorade. First was all natural. It's water from a coconut. The second is it's functional. So coconut water has potassium, magnesium, functional benefits for hydration. And the third kicker was it's simple. The only ingredient is water from a coconut compared to the 25 chemicals that go into a Gatorade. As we thought about energy drinks, we realized we had the exact same proposition in the energy drink category, that Red Bull and Monster are completely dominant in that segment and are loaded with artificial ingredients and extremely macho, hardcore brand propositions. So what we had was a simple leaf from the Amazon, all natural, that had all the functional benefits for energy. A can of RUNA has more caffeine than a Red Bull just from the brewed guayusa leaves. And that clarity of purpose and that alignment with what could make us dramatically different in the marketplace gave us phenomenal ability to grow relatively quickly, though not without getting kicked in the nuts and punched in the face plenty of times. Have people seen the movie Birdman? Yeah? One of my favorite sayings is the part in the movie where he one of his performances bombed and he's trying to explain to his daughter and she's like, "How are you doing, Dad?" He's like, "Well, I kind of feel like there's a little version of myself that has a little hammer that's just constantly tapping me in the nuts all the time." And when things are going really bad, I'm like, God, that feels like exactly my life every day. But lo and behold, we were able to use a lot of those same principles I talked about before, build a diverse team around us, get a board of advisors that could help guide us, ask questions of anyone who would talk to us, to learn, be students, build partnerships. And we built a rapidly growing beverage brand. We have our clean energy drinks. We also have ready-to-drink iced teas. We're in about 15,000 stores and growing. Beverages are a dogfight. It's a very expensive, very challenging type of business to launch. And we're still in the throes of it. You know, we're by no means like I sold my company for $1 billion. It was awesome. Good luck. We're in the trenches every day trying to make it work. And these types of businesses are not easy. These are not easy kinds of businesses to build. And one of the things I also just want to emphasize and request as well is all of you, please do anything you can to support the businesses that had tables and that pitched here. You know, whether it's donating $5, $10, organizing a dinner, this community is what will make those businesses work. Assets is doing phenomenal work to support them, but it's all of you individually making decisions who are going to make that work. And I promise you, my business would not exist if it wasn't for my community and the people around us who gave us that support. So I strong nudge to support these businesses. All right, this guy. So I was up in Connecticut with one of our angel investors a few years ago, this older Indian gentleman, and he was trying to help us out, make some contacts, and he said, "Hey, you know this guy Tatum Channing?" I'm like, "I think you mean Channing Tatum." Yeah, I've heard of him. He's like, "Oh, do you think he could be helpful to your business?" I'm like, yeah. Probably could. I was actually, my very good friend and mentor, Neil, who's in the audience, who lives here, ironically, who connected me to this guy, Sanjay, and then Channing. So I have Neil to thank up there for the connection. So Sanjay calls his other friend, Neil, separate Neils, who knew Channing. And this other guy, Neil, calls Channing and says, "Hey, you got to check out this stuff called RUNA." To which he responds, "RUNA? Like, we live on RUNA. What are you talking about?" It turns out that they had to write the first Magic Mike, he and his business partner, in like 3 weeks. So they basically chugged RUNA nonstop for about 3 weeks to write Magic Mike. So then Neil said, "Oh, that's great. You got to meet. I'll connect you to the CEO, this guy Tyler Gage." And Channing said, "Oh, nice try, Neil. Like, I'm not falling for that. Like, talk to you later." The reason being that his big breakout movie was a dance movie called Step Up. People ever saw it? His character's name in that movie was Tyler Gage. Yeah. So ever since I was about 19 years old, I've been getting Channing Tatum jokes. But bizarre coincidence, we connected, and he pretty immediately resonated with the spirit of what we do. You know, people often ask, "How'd you get these people to support the business?" I truly believe it's the authenticity of what we do. It was meeting guys like Channing and other people and being like, "Hey, I'm not a businessman. I don't know if we'll build a billion-dollar company, but I believe in what we do, and we do it with heart. And we do it because we're on a bigger mission than just selling beverages." And we've been able to attract crazy support out of really unseen, unexpected places, I think because of that authenticity. And it's something that I feel like the business sector writ large is moving towards every little degree, every single day. That the magnetism and uniqueness of authenticity is extremely hard to parallel. And I think it's a resource which is vacant from our mental supply chain, if you will. So I think people who are standing up to do things with heart and authenticity, there's a lot more hunger for people to support and be connected to those kind of businesses. The other thing we've recently done with Channing Support is through RUNA Foundation, we've helped fund and create a really pioneering medical clinic in the Amazon with our friends, the Zapara, who's an endangered tribe of only about 500 people left. And we're doing really pioneering research using Amazonian plant medicines to treat modern diseases. Some things like post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and some autoimmune disorders as well. That's a big vision and a big, very ambitious project we've recently taken on, but one of the things I'm most passionate about right now. All right, so where can I leave all of you before we get the verdict on who won? Y'all must just be shaking right now. I don't think any of them listened to a word I said. I think they're all just there, like, which is great. I think they recorded it, so you can check it later. But yeah, so I want to share a couple things. Just thinking about some things that would be applicable for some entrepreneurs in the crowd, but pretty much anyone. The first, and this is a challenge, another invitation that doesn't require looking like an idiot at this point, is to think about, and specifically if you want to try the exercise, to write down, take some time to journal, 10 things that you're curious about. So ideally, these are things which are not related to anything that you do, you study, or your work. And as I hope my journey shows, the value of the unusual and the unexpected can be some of the most nourishing and supportive things in life. I think you look at powerful innovations, powerful changes in the world, pretty rarely do they come through linear means. And I think if everyone reflected on some of the most transformational experiences in your own life, probably very few of them happened in linear, sequential, expected order. And I think the more that we can proactively lean into the things which we're curious about, whether it could be a random sports thing or travel or a place or something to read about, just something that feels like it has something for you that you don't know what it is, my invitation would be to explore that. Whether it's informally, formally, to take some time to think about what those things are and lean in where maybe a little scary, a little bit vulnerable, but to figure out what's there. And it could be big, could be small. It's definitely what all these entrepreneurs are doing in their lives. That would be the very first thing. The second thing, too, I would offer is to continue to support the local communities and not just the entrepreneurs. I'm such a big believer in organic and fair trade. I'm on my soapbox. You all have to indulge me. But a lot of what was cited before of the incredible influence we can have voting with our dollars every single day is unparalleled. It's something that just takes thinking a little bit about how we can be more connected to the people and the places around us. And in my life, I've found incredible nourishment and inspiration from that. I think you guys have that in spades from everything I've seen tonight and been here. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen and enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you so much.